here. Woof. You're looking at a Shiba Inu dog, which is a mascot for a particular cryptocurrency. The dog refers to an internet joke from years back where there were jokes, captions, little words that accompany that now famous dog photo. But while the cryptocurrency that I'm mentioning here started as a joke, it actually became a global phenomenon, kind of an approachable alternative to Bitcoin, as Forbes reports. Now, the currency is called Doge. About $3 billion plus trades in this dog currency. This is the digital financial world we live in. And it's in the news tonight. I'll explain to you exactly why, because Elon Musk owns a bunch of this digital currency. You don't have to know the details. You don't have to have a strong view on whether cryptocurrency will matter or not in the future. Just know that Elon Musk owns it, and he uses his business platforms and fame to promote it so that it might go up in value. And if Elon Musk is effective in that effort and makes money by promoting this digital product through his business activities, that's fine. It's perfectly legal. Plenty of people both risk and make money that way, especially nowadays with a lot of stuff going on the internet. But Elon Musk's going a lot further. He wants big government help to make his money. You could call it Trump welfare or a subsidy. Some watchdogs call it a conflict of interest and government grifting. But I'm showing you that dog for a very serious reason. Musk is actually rushing to use his influence in this incoming Trump administration to get the government to promote that dog cryptocurrency. As a factual historical matter, that's very unusual. Now, there are plenty of outside groups which have advised presidents or the government, including on spending. I'm going to give you just a couple examples. There was a debt reduction commission. There's advisors on science. These are just their names. Pretty normal. This is deliberately dry or boring. You'll notice these commissions and advisory boards, which are for the public good, are named based on what they do. They're not branded Exxon or Coca-Cola. You don't see an Exxon commission there that gets the word Exxon running around, even if you had a former Exxon official involved. But Elon Musk's new spending advisory group has been named Doge to promote the dog cryptocurrency that he wants to profit from. Now, Musk made that acronym out of different words. So they call it Department of Government Efficiency. It's not actually a federal department, but they wanted to get the D in there, right? You have to have Congress if you want to create a department. But Musk is trying to get free media and promotion every time any outlet, print, digital, television, has to necessarily cover this incoming administration and what he says he's going to do as an outside advisor, and they end up saying Doge a lot, which promotes his crypto, the crypto he owns. Now, we will cover the advisory group when it's newsworthy, but other than this fact check, we're not going to be referring to it by this sort of business propaganda name designed to promote Musk's favored crypto. Now, this is a somewhat common ploy by Elon Musk, and I'm beginning with this not because it's a cute dog, not because we're trying to make some larger point, but because it's telling that this whole thing doesn't begin with a focus on you or saving you money or your tax dollars. It begins quite blatantly by promoting Elon Musk's financial interests. If you look at what he did with X and Twitter, remember, his career, where he has done some impressive things, wasn't about ACLU free speech advocacy, but he's run Twitter now to promote himself and his views. There's reports about censoring critics, amplifying allies. It's his company, he can do that, but it breaks those vows he made about free speech. Bit of a pattern here. A lot of talk about one thing, and then he does the self-interested business thing. The government, you should remember, also has a budget and accountability office, which is supposed to deal with these things. And it has more power than the outside group that Musk and other Trump allies are now on about spending. In fact, a budget expert who ran a key government post actually recently noted that this Musk effort is really more like a think tank because they don't control the scope of government, the size of government. They can brainstorm, they can cajole, and they have begun doing that.
We expect mass reductions. We expect certain agencies to be deleted outright.
Do we really need, whatever it is, 428 federal agencies? We'll be looking at everything from government-funded media programs like NPR.
I think we should be able to get away with 99 agencies. I don't know.
We are on the brink of something so revolutionary with the DOJ Commission.
Musk had floated some cuts going up to trillions. Now, he just lost the spending clash heading into the new year, if you were tuned out of the news, which is totally understandable. Basically, he showed a misunderstanding of certain budget details. He used his power to delay a bill that then got passed without some of the big asks that he and other Trump allies had made. But he did get a China rule gutted from that final package, which benefits his business. Note the pattern. Now he's begun changing some claims. He says it won't be necessarily $2 trillion in cuts. Maybe he's learning as he goes. But if you actually follow U.S. news, you might already know what Elon Musk appears to be learning, because you've probably covered and watched past battles about spending. From the Gingrich era to the Obama era, many talk about cuts, massive cuts. But when you get into it, the big ticket federal government spending items are, well, things like this. Trillions, right? That's big money, but on safety net programs like Social Security and health care, the United States military, defense, and then what you have to do, which is servicing interest on the debt. Many governments use that model of funding. So everything you're looking at on your screen are things that majorities tend to value or are basically required. You can't default on the interest. Now, an administration can cut other things. Vowing giant cuts, though, will run back into what I just showed you, things that Trump even vowed to protect, like the safety net. Now, we're going to be hearing a lot about this in the next few weeks, especially when they take office. And if you take a broader view, some of this is not specific to Elon Musk or Donald Trump. There are long-running clashes about the cost of the government. So let's take a look at that. There have been big jumps in spending, but if you'll notice, while both sides come into office and spend federal government money, what you're looking at, these are just facts and numbers, is the budget deficit by year. And while there's multiple factors, to be fair, you will notice that big Trump jump from the tax cuts and other things. And Trump wants to do more tax cuts. So there are valid policy trade-offs here. You can go across that recent history and talk about who wanted to spend what. Obama wanted to do Obamacare, which they did, and there was spending on that. Trump did what he did, including tax cuts, as Bush did, and there was spending on that. But the idea that one side is spending and the other isn't is false. And if you've heard or internalized Republican talking points or MAGA talking points that somehow they're not the ones spending and the deficit and the debt is someone else's fault, well, the numbers don't show that. Republican administrations have grown this debt, which you're now going to be hearing about a lot as an excuse or a rationale to do things. Sometimes, though, they're just blaming it on others, then hailing themselves as the one to do the spending cuts. And Trump allies, including Musk, have also, and this is important because, again, we're not bringing in people who are budget experts. Some of them Trump has chosen to bring in. He won the election. He can bring in advisors, but some of them are known for amassing money for themselves. Not for you. Not caring about the federal government. I'll give Elon Musk this. It's proven fact he's very good at amassing wealth and building businesses, and that's fine. But he's done that partly by pocketing money from those tax cuts I mentioned. People like him will benefit the most because they make the most, they have the most in wealth. And he's taken plenty of government subsidies. And yet then they're the ones complaining that other people with less money should be the one tightening their belts. It's an old story, actually. We just now have new methods and mediums and internet hype about it. But they're saying slash the money, just not their money.
You put $90 billion, like 50 years worth of breaks into solar and wind, to Solyndra and Fisker and Tesla.
SpaceX has already earned more than $19 billion from its prime contracts with the government.
Two of Musk's companies have more than $15 billion in federal contracts with roughly a dozen federal agencies.
Now, that is just the factual history. And Elon Musk, who likes to name things and promote things and clearly is good at communicating, getting people talking about everything but what you see on your screen, which is he's financially tied to a dozen government agencies. So he's taking a lot of this money, and that might be valid. Indeed, I would mention there's been a bipartisan history of working with him on some of his companies, from space to green car companies, and that's fine. But he also wants to make you believe that he has the mantle of this outside advisor who will just cut all kinds of spending, or he's going to bargain with these agencies that he has a business relationship with, which is a blatant conflict of interest. In fact, it would be illegal to do what he's doing if he took a permanent, aka real, government job. And that may be why Musk has held back on that. These are individuals who know how a lot of things work, and they clearly want to be outside advisors to sort of have it both ways, make a lot of noise, have influence over the very government that subsidizes them and their tax cuts and their business dealings or their China regulations, but not going in full time where you wouldn't be allowed to do that double dipping. More broadly, Elon Musk, who we've covered here because he's influential in many ways, has achieved certain things. Certainly revolutionized part of the green energy car industry in ways that a lot of governments, the United States included, think is positive. He also has a well-known history of over-promising.
We're going all the way to Mars, I think. That's
Time frame?
best case 10 years,
Is there a rough date for the Mars landing in your mind?
but 11 or 12 years. The Tesla car next year will probably be 90% capable of autopilot. So 90% of your miles could be on auto. The system worked as described, which is that it's a hands-on system. It is not a self-driving system.
What's the purpose of having autopilot if you still have to put your hands on the wheel, Elon?
What are supposed to be shatterproof windows, but against this metal ball?
Oh my God. Well, the evidence in the market and in the production of all kinds of business products shows Elon Musk to be effective. Both things can be true. He can be effective in that realm while still overpromising and underdelivering at times, and not necessarily be either an expert or a good faith advocate for you, the taxpayer and the citizen, about this spending.